I've always preferred solitude. It's kind of a prerequisite for my job. I'm a wildlife biologist, mostly focused on ungulates, bighorn sheep, elk, and mountain goats. That fall, I was on a 2-week solo assignment up in the Bitterroot Mountains, collecting trail cam data and tagging movements along a known goat corridor. I was alone out there, just me, my gear, and miles of ridgelines, scree fields, and pine-thick valleys where most people wouldn't last a night. I've done work in harsher terrain, Alaska in sleet season, Utah in summer heat, but the Bitterroots have this particular stillness to them. You hear every footstep, every shift of wind. It's the kind of place where the silence becomes a sound all its own. I like that about it. It let me think. I was coming off a bad breakup, and the idea of disappearing into a place without phone service, people, or obligations sounded like the only thing that made sense. Mid-September's perfect for what I do. The days are cool, the nights are crisp, and most of the summer tourists have thinned out. I packed pretty light, my ultralight tent, stove, freeze-dried meals, my field journal, and a 357 I keep holstered on long trips. For bears or mountain lions, never people. My satellite beacon stays clipped to my vest, and I had 3 trail cameras I'd planned to rotate every few days. I keep my routines pretty locked in. Rise with the sun, hike my lines, take notes, retrieve camera data, and be back before dusk. That's the rhythm. You don't deviate from it unless you want to get lost or worse. Nothing exciting on the hike in, which was exactly what I wanted. I followed a narrow game trail down into a basin shaped like a natural amphitheater. Steep rock faces on 3 sides, heavy pine cover, and only one good exit. I set camp near a narrow creek and got to work. The first 2 days were textbook. Lots of fresh scat, a few minor goat trails with print overlap, and one decent sighting near sunset. Nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't see another soul. I didn't expect to. There's no reason to be out that far, unless you're a researcher or incredibly lost. By the 3rd night, I had gotten into that strange half-feral mental space you slip into when it's just you and the wild. I wasn't talking out loud anymore. My thoughts slowed down. I started noticing the little details. The way the light caught spiderwebs strung between the branches, or how the ravens seemed to favor the same flight path down the ridge each morning. That night, I made campfire stew, the kind where you toss whatever's left in the pot and pretend it tastes different from the night before. I sat with my back to a rock wall, the fire crackling low, jacket zipped to my throat, headlamp hanging from the guy line to give me a pool of overhead light. It was while I was scraping the last bits of food from my bowl that I saw something across the ravine. At first, I thought it was a tree stump I hadn't noticed before. It was just this vertical shape at the edge of the trees, across maybe 200 yards of open space. But something felt off. I grabbed my binoculars, slowly stood up, and focused in. It was a man, just standing there. Arms at his sides, no fire, no flashlight, no visible gear, just watching. And the worst part? He wasn't even dressed for the cold, not in the way you'd expect. No puffy jacket, no hat, just a dark outline of a man, perfectly still. I waited, thinking he'd wave or call out or turn away, but he didn't move, didn't even flinch. I stood there for a long time before finally backing down and zipping up the tent. There was no reason for him to be there, and no reason for me to sleep easy after that. The next morning, I checked the ridge before I even got out of the tent. Nothing. No figure, no tracks that I could see. Still, something about it nagged at me. I convinced myself I imagined it. The fire, the shadows, the way your eyes play tricks when you're tired. I packed up for the day's hike and tried not to dwell on it. But when I got back that evening, exhausted, dirty, ready to eat. I looked across the ravine again, and he was there. Same spot, same posture. That night, I kept my headlamp off. I sat in the dark, wrapped in my sleeping bag, peeking through a small slit in the tent's mesh. I wanted to see if he moved, if he went anywhere. But he didn't. He just stood there. It continued. Night after night, he never came closer, never lit a fire, never set up a camp. He was just there, watching. The temperature dropped into the 30s, and I still didn't see him wear anything heavier. No gloves, no hat. I never once saw him crouch or rest. No signs of life around him, not even steam from his breath. I started thinking maybe it wasn't a person at all. Maybe it was a cutout. Something someone put there to scare hikers off. But it was so remote. Too remote. Who would go to that effort? On the 6th night, I took out my trail cam cards to start reviewing data. Most of the captures were of deer and goats, which was expected. But one camera, positioned about 50 yards from camp, showed something else. A blur of movement, low to the ground, a crouching shape, human-shaped. It passed through the edge of the frame around 3:47 a.m. and disappeared behind a boulder. The timestamp was from 2 nights earlier. That camera faced the creek, not the ravine. I stayed wide awake the entire night. The next morning, I checked the camera trap lines more carefully. Nothing missing, but one had been rotated slightly, just enough to shift its angle. I hadn't done that. No animals would have either, not without knocking it over. Back at camp, I found something else. A shoe print. Not mine. Not a boot. A worn, flat-soled shoe like you'd get from a surplus store. It was near the fire pit, mostly covered in dried pine needles. And when I looked across the ravine that evening, he wasn't there. The absence made it worse. That night, the woods felt tighter. The normal sounds, wind, creaking trees, owls, were gone. Just silence, dense and total. I sat with my headlamp off, my hand on the 357. At 2:39 a.m., I heard it. A slow crunch of gravel behind the tent. Not a branch snap, not a squirrel. A slow, steady step. Then another. Then silence. I didn't unzip the tent. I didn't move. The next morning, I stepped out as the sun rose. The fire pit looked different. 2 new stones had been added to the ring. I checked my trail cams again, and that's when I found it. One of the memory cards had footage from that night. Early morning, just before dawn. It showed the man crouched beside my tent, but he wasn't looking in. He was facing outward, toward the woods, head tilted, like he was listening for something. He stayed that way for almost 10 minutes, and then, without looking back, he stood up and walked back toward the ravine. I left the camera playing on loop while I sat outside. I didn't eat, didn't write in my journal. I just sat there in the cold, watching that grainy clip over and over again. His posture wasn't threatening, it was reverent almost, like he was waiting for a response. I couldn't stop thinking, what was he listening to? That evening, I stayed up again. No fire, no light, just my back against the tent wall and my ears straining in the dark. At 3:06 a.m., something changed. I didn't hear a step or a voice. The woods changed. It felt like everything had been tense and finally relaxed at once. The kind of pressure drop that you feel in your teeth. And then I heard something. Not words. Not music. A whistle. One long note. And then silence again. I waited until sunrise. Packed everything fast and clumsy. Hauled it all back up the ridgeline without stopping to rest. I didn't bother rotating the last camera or checking the final GPS tag. I hiked straight out, 12 miles with 70 pounds of gear, no brakes. When I finally reached my truck and got a signal, I sent a message to my supervisor saying I was cutting the trip short. Said I'd explain later. Told them I was sick. They didn't push back. I uploaded the data when I got home. All of it except the one card. The one with the crouching man. That one I kept. I still have it. Sometimes I watch that clip again, trying to catch something I missed. A gesture, a sound, a clue. But there's nothing new. Just him. Still. Facing the woods. Listening. I never told anyone the full story. Not my supervisor, not the other researchers in the group thread, not even my sister, and we usually talk about everything. I didn't want the looks. The questions. The logical explanations that always sound like they're trying to fix your memory instead of just listening to it. A few months later, I was in a gear shop talking to another biologist who'd just come off a project further south. Casual conversation. I mentioned the Bitterroots, and he nodded slowly, said, "That place has a weird silence to it. You know what I mean?" I just nodded. Didn't say more. What really gets me is that I never figured out what he was listening for. He wasn't watching me. That much is clear. He didn't approach, didn't threaten, didn't even acknowledge me. He came to that ravine for something else. Something deeper in those woods. Sometimes I wonder if he was warning me. If crouching beside my tent was his way of saying, "Stay still, don't make a sound." Like I was in more danger than I even knew. I haven't been back to that basin. I've built entire studies around avoiding that part of the map. I still can't get that image out of my head. The way he listened like something was going to answer. He didn't come for me. He came to wait. I just happened to be near. I've been hunting solo since I got out of the service. It's the only thing that ever gave me the same kind of stillness I used to find on overnight patrol. When your mind narrows down to just movement, sound, and keeping your senses sharp. Some guys get it from fishing. I get it from walking the woods with a rifle. That year, I picked the Ouachita National Forest. It's quiet, thick with pine, and far enough out that you can hike for hours without seeing another boot track. October's my go-to. Cold enough that the brush starts thinning, warm enough that you don't freeze if you have to bed down unexpectedly. I'd parked my truck off a fire road and hiked about 6 miles in. I didn't bring a tent, just a tarp, bedroll, small stove, and those awful MREs you only eat when your teeth are good and your standards low. I knew what I was doing. Carried a compass, not a phone, no signal out there anyway. The first 2 days were solid. Got eyes on 3 whitetails and a bobcat that bolted the second it caught my scent. Nights were crisp but manageable. I made camp near a deadfall, kept the fire small, and turned in early. No issues. Until the 3rd night. I was about a mile from camp, crouched up on a rise with a clear line on a meadow below. I'd been glassing for about 40 minutes when I heard it. A scream. Not an animal. A man. Loud, panicked, and close. It echoed through the trees, frantic, broken, like someone running from something. I stood up fast, turned toward the sound, hand already on the rifle. It came again. Same words, same voice, same pitch. But here's the thing. It didn't change. No stumble, no branch crack, no shift in direction. It just repeated. "Help me!" Again, same exact tone, like pressing play on a cassette. I started moving toward it. Slowly. Rifle at low ready. I've heard people yell for help in real situations. It's messy, desperate. This wasn't that. It felt too clean. I walked maybe 200 yards. The voice stayed the same spot, same volume. That's not how sound works in the woods. It should have faded or bounced, but it didn't. Every few seconds, "Help me!" Then it cut off, just stopped, mid-yell. I held position for a while. My breathing was steady, but my hands had gone cold. I did a slow 360 with the rifle, checked the tree line, listened. Nothing. I waited maybe 10 more minutes before backing out. Took a different trail back to camp, just in case. Nothing followed me. Nothing spooked the birds. Back at camp, I barely slept. Kept the fire going and my back to the boulder. Every noise made my ears twitch, but I didn't hear the scream again. Next morning, I decided to hike back toward where I'd heard it. Not close, but close enough to get a better look. There were no signs of a struggle. No tracks. But then I spotted something odd. A piece of cord strung low between two trees. Camouflage paracord about shin height. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. I followed the cord. It led to a tree maybe 15 feet ahead. And there, duct taped to the back of the trunk, was a cassette recorder. An old one, portable, still running. I stepped closer. It clicked, rewound, and started playing. "Help me!" That same voice, again and again. Then I checked behind the tree. Boot prints, fresh, just one set, coming in. I didn't touch the recorder. I left it running, just backed away the way I came. As I got farther out, I kept checking my back. Something wasn't right. No animals around. Even the bugs were quiet. I made it back to camp by noon, packed up in under 5 minutes, left the fire ring cold and the tarp in the bag. I hiked the entire way out in one shot. Didn't eat, didn't stop to piss, just moved. Got to the truck around sundown. Engine turned over fine, which felt like a miracle. When I finally hit pavement again, it felt like that strange pressure in my ears faded. I didn't sleep when I got home. I just locked every door, turned on every light, and sat on the couch with my shotgun. For days, I kept thinking about those prints, how there was only one set, how they led to the tree and just stopped. Like whoever or whatever put that thing there didn't leave the same way. A few days later, after I'd gotten some sleep and convinced myself I'd just been spooked by something explainable, I went out to the garage to clean my gear. And then, there it was, the recorder. Sitting right there in the back of my truck bed, wedged behind my cooler. Same model, same duct tape on the sides. I hadn't touched it. I know that. I didn't take it with me. I left it strapped to that tree. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Didn't want to touch it, but I had to know. I pressed play. "Help me!" Same voice, same loop, still running. I threw it in a garbage bag and shoved it deep into the can at the curb. Piled another bag on top. It was trash night anyway. Next morning, the bag was on my front porch. Not ripped, not mangled, just sitting there, like someone had gently placed it in front of my door. Someone was playing a game with me, or sending a message. But what bothered me more than anything else was the voice. It was familiar. I listened again, really listened. Played it back a dozen times. Whoever set that up wanted me to find it, and they knew exactly how to make me listen. I screwed up some pretty bad people's lives when I was in the service. Only thing that makes sense is someone came back for payback. I didn't go back to Ouachita. Haven't been on a solo hunt since. These days, I stick to range practice and trail walking with buddies. I still like the quiet, but I don't trust it like I used to. A few months after the recorder showed up for the second time, I moved. Different town, different job. I figured maybe I'd finally get away from whatever was following me. For a while, it seemed like I had. Then last week, I got a package. No return address, no postage. Just left on my front step while I was at work. Inside was a flash drive. I plugged it in. Probably shouldn't have, but I did. One file, audio only. It started with the same looped scream, over and over. But then something different. After about 30 seconds, the recording cut to static. And then I heard breathing. Not frantic, just close, like someone holding the mic an inch from their mouth. I closed the file, took the flash drive out, but I swear I still hear that voice. Sometimes at night, when it's quiet and I'm lying there trying to sleep, I swear I hear that voice again. Not from the speaker, from somewhere just outside my bedroom wall. And what really gets me? It doesn't sound like a recording anymore. Someone wanted me to find it, and they knew exactly how to make me listen. I work in forestry services in northern Minnesota, mostly within Superior National Forest. My job includes everything from tracking soil erosion to inspecting fire rings and checking permits. Basically making sure people don't do dumb things on protected land. It's pretty plain, but it gets me outdoors, and I love the quiet. Empty trails, trees creaking, and that peaceful vibe that clears your head. Every fall, once the overnight temperatures start dropping and the leaves have fully dropped, we get assigned to inspect and close out backcountry campsites for the winter. That means hiking to the more remote sites, checking that they're clear of trash, making sure nothing's been left behind, and confirming they're actually on the registry. Most of these sites don't get much traffic once the summer crowds are gone. By late October, you're more likely to run into deer than campers. Most of the time, these sites are completely empty. Occasionally, we find leftover gear, old tarps, half-burned logs, maybe a broken folding chair. I found rusted knives, moldy bags of granola, once even a shredded teddy bear left in the dirt like it'd been through a windstorm. But in November 2022, I came across something that still makes my skin crawl every time I think about it. It was a Tuesday. Snow had started to fall the day before. Not a full-on storm, but enough to coat everything in a crunchy white crust. The air was completely still. No birds, no wind. Just the sound of my boots and the scrape of my walking stick against a tree when I lost my balance. I'd been assigned 5 sites that day, all spaced about a mile apart along a poorly maintained trail system. The 4th was supposed to be an old scout site that hadn't been used officially in years. It wasn't even on the public map anymore, just a coordinate entry in our internal GPS database. I'd marked it as likely abandoned in my prep notes, but I still had to hike out and check it. When I got close to the clearing, I knew something was off. The underbrush looked trampled. There were footprints in the snow, fresh ones. And then, tucked against the tree line, I saw it. A tent. It was a faded orange 2-person dome tent, fully staked and intact. The snow around it had been cleared recently. The fire pit in the center of the site was black with ash that hadn't been touched by snowfall. A stack of firewood, carefully arranged, sat nearby under a makeshift tarp canopy. The footprints moved back and forth between the tent and the fire pit. Just one set, heavy enough to suggest an adult pacing. No extra gear outside the tent, no food wrappers or gear clutter. Everything about it was very precise. I called it in, told dispatch I'd found an unregistered active camp. They asked if anyone was present, and I said no. It looked like someone had just stepped away but hadn't taken anything with them. I was told to log it, take photos, and wait for a follow-up call from the district ranger. I snapped photos from a distance, uploaded the coordinates, and stood there in the stillness, watching my breath cloud and fade. The woods were silent in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt watchful. I slowly approached the tent. It was zipped shut. No signs of movement inside. "Hello?" I called out. "Forestry services. Anyone here?" Silence. I tapped the canvas gently. Still nothing. I unzipped it halfway and leaned in. Inside was a single sleeping bag, adult-sized, zipped tight, puffed up with something inside. There was no lantern, no sleeping pad, no backpack. Just the bag, lying in the center of the tent like it had been placed there intentionally. It wasn't moving. There was no sound, but it was definitely full. I stared at it, unsure what to do. I've opened dozens of abandoned sleeping bags before, usually just dirty clothes, maybe an old sleeping mat. But this one made something in my gut twist. I couldn't explain why, but I didn't want to open it. I stepped outside, called dispatch again, and requested backup. They told me it would take at least 2 hours for anyone to reach my location. Cell signal was patchy, so they'd radio the Rangers and follow up as soon as they could. I was told to stay put, stay safe, and not touch anything else until someone arrived. So I waited. I paced around the site for a while, trying not to stare at the tent. The footprints had started to harden in the cold, and I noticed something odd. They were all the same depth. No sign of someone kneeling or sitting. Just that pacing back and forth between the tent and the fire pit. I sat on a rock near the edge of the site, trying to shake the tension building in my chest. I thought about going back to my truck and meeting the Rangers halfway, but the last thing I wanted was to abandon the scene and have it turn out to be important. So, I stayed. 2 hours passed, then 3. The sun had started to dip behind the trees, and the temperature was dropping quickly. The whole site was covered in those stretched out shadows. My phone still had no bars. I hadn't heard back from anyone. I didn't want to spend the night out there, and I couldn't leave without knowing what was inside that sleeping bag. So I forced myself back into the tent. The zipper on the bag was stiff, like it hadn't been used in a while. I tugged it down slowly. The zipper sounded way too loud in the stillness of the enclosed space. The first thing I saw was cloth, soft, child-sized fabric, like the kind used in onesies or tiny fleece pajamas. Then more, layers of small clothing, different colors, folded oddly. Then I saw the head of a doll. Then another, and another. There were 5 of them, each about the size of a toddler, packed tightly side by side inside the sleeping bag. All dressed in real children's clothes, some with frilly collars, one with a cartoon bear on the chest. One had a pacifier in its mouth. Another had crude eyes drawn on with black marker, wide ovals, staring upward. And the air inside the bag was warm. I backed out of the tent so fast I nearly tore the flap open. I grabbed my pack and moved 20 feet away, breathing hard. I stood frozen until headlights appeared through the trees. A ranger had finally arrived, middle-aged, quiet, serious. He walked the site with me, looked at the tent, and went inside. He didn't unzip the bag, just stood over it, staring for a long time. Then he came out, gave me a long look, and said, "We'll take it from here." I logged my report that night, photos, GPS data, the works. The next morning when I went to follow up, my supervisor told me that site wasn't in my assigned region. Suggested maybe I'd gotten turned around in the snow. I couldn't sleep for days because of what was in that sleeping bag. We weren't doing great when we took that trip. I think we both knew it, even if neither of us wanted to say it out loud. Married 7 years, no kids, too many quiet dinners, and separate routines. It was like we'd become polite strangers who shared a bed. So we did what couples do when they're not ready to admit something's broken. We booked a weekend in the woods and told ourselves nature would help. Some forced intimacy, no distractions, just trees and time. Mark Twain National Forest, Missouri. We'd been there once before when things were better. Early in the relationship, back when everything was exciting. I think we were both clinging to the idea that maybe returning would fix us. Reignite something. Clear air, no phones, sleeping under the stars. That kind of thing. We got there late Friday afternoon, set up the tent in silence, ate in silence. Every conversation felt like it might tip over into a fight. It didn't help that we'd already snapped at each other during the drive. Dumb stuff. Missed turns, wrong playlist, me driving too fast, her nitpicking the snacks. Little things that added up to too much distance. Saturday morning, we hiked a short trail loop, barely speaking. By lunchtime, it was worse. One of those petty arguments that builds into something meaner. I don't even remember how it started. All I know is she ended up zipped inside the tent, and I walked off without saying where I was going. Just grabbed my day pack and left, trying to act like I had a plan. The plan was to cool off, clear my head, get out of earshot, think about what I wanted, if anything was still worth salvaging. I didn't take a trail. Just headed off into the trees, following the slope until the camp was out of view. After 20 minutes or so, I slowed down, let myself breathe. The woods were still heavy with that early fall dampness. It smelled like leaves, damp bark, and the last traces of summer dying off. And then I realized something that didn't register at first. The forest was quiet. Not peaceful, not serene, just quiet. No wind, no birds, no insects, no rustling of squirrels or chipmunks darting through brush. I stopped walking, turned in a slow circle. It crept in real slow. That feeling you get when you walk into a room where someone was just talking about you. The sense that something unseen is very much aware of you, like the woods were watching, listening. I scanned the trees. Nothing, no movement. But the silence felt loaded. I turned around, thinking maybe I should head back. As I turned, I caught a flash of white on the trail ahead of me, if you could even call it a trail. A Polaroid, lying face up in the dirt. I walked over and picked it up. It was us, me and my wife, laughing, sitting by the fire pit at camp. I was wearing the same clothes I had on now. Her hand was on my knee. Her hair was pulled back just like it had been this morning. Same hair tie, same silver ring on her right hand. We didn't bring a camera, not a Polaroid, not a disposable, not even our phones. We'd agreed, no screens, no tech. The whole point was to disconnect. But there it was, real, crisp, developed. The kind you'd have to take, shake, and wait for it to appear. I felt my legs start moving before I made the decision. I turned and started walking fast. Not quite running, but close. My heart wasn't racing, but my stomach felt tight. Every few steps, I looked back. The trees seemed denser now, like the space behind me was filling in. By the time I got back to camp, the light had changed. That strange amber tone that shows up in late afternoon when the sun dips just low enough to make everything feel like it's being lit from the side. The tent was still there. Her water bottle, our packs. The food bag hung from a branch undisturbed. But she wasn't. I called her name. Once, twice, louder. No answer. I checked the tent. Her phone was inside, still in airplane mode. Her hoodie was on the sleeping bag, folded with the sleeves tucked in like she always did. And sitting on top of the pillow, another Polaroid. This one was just her. Standing in the woods, same hoodie, same ponytail, looking directly at the camera. Her face was pale, eyes wide, like she was afraid, but trying not to show it, like she wasn't alone behind the lens. Behind her in the photo, the trees were shadowed, blurred, like something was moving or hiding. I don't remember what I yelled. I think I screamed her name until my throat hurt. I searched in circles, ran the trail, checked the ridge, climbed the nearby rocks, scanned the trees. Nothing. The woods were still dead quiet, but the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was aggressive. By the time the park rangers found me, it was full dark. I must have looked half feral. I was barefoot, had dropped my pack somewhere. My hands were scraped up and my voice was gone. I was just wandering the brush near camp, holding one of the photos, yelling like it would change something. They calmed me down enough to talk, and we started a grid search. About half a mile from the tent, deep into a thicket of oak and briars, one of the rangers radioed in. They'd found her. She was curled against the base of a tree, scratched up, shaking, could barely speak. She didn't cry, didn't ask questions, just clung to me like she'd been underwater too long and finally came up for air. Later, after the medics checked her out, after the sheriff took our statements, she told me what she remembered. A man had jumped on her inside the tent, pinned her down, covered her mouth with his hand. She tried to scream, but he was too strong. She said he didn't say a word, just dragged her, quick and quiet, out of camp and into the woods. She didn't know how she got away. Said he stopped, maybe thought she was unconscious. When he turned his back for a second, she bolted, ran blind until she couldn't anymore. She couldn't describe his face, said she never saw it clearly. Just dark clothes, cold hands, no voice. The rangers never found the man. No prints, no gear, no trail. She started therapy the week after. Took months before she could talk about it without shaking. We still don't talk about that trip. But she still remembers the way he smelled. And now every time she is walking down the street and smells something similar, she panics and wants to get out of there fast. If you thought deep woods were unsettling, wait until the silence comes with a front porch view. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop your creepiest wilderness moment in the comments. Because the further you get from cell towers, the stranger the neighbors become. Click now to watch 4 disturbing countryside horror stories where quiet towns hide loud secrets. Stay sharp, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.